What makes a story unforgettable? Is it the plot, the characters, or the way it's told? Today I'm breaking down the art of storytelling and why it's a skill everybody should master. Welcome to the Chatterbox Podcast. My name is Jason, and today we're diving deep into the world of storytelling, from crafting emotional connections to using visuals, dialogue, and structure to create unforgettable narratives. We'll explore frameworks like Dan Harmon's Story Cycle, discuss how to connect emotionally with your audience, and share tips for making your stories resonate long while they're being told and after they're being told. So, I want to talk about why I'm so interested in storytelling. I've been very passionate about storytelling for, I would say, the past couple of years. I have a document that I've created where I've accumulated a bunch of notes on storytelling, why I like storytelling, the different strategies of storytelling, how to tell a story, how to structure a story, how to get emotion in the story, and how music plays a crucial role in getting emotions in stories, and how to make it interesting, how to have a hook, how to make someone follow a character, fall in love with a character, have it be interesting to them. And now the reason why this is important to me is because the past couple of years I've also been writing a book, which I'm still working on, still in the process of working on it. But it's been a journey, a lot of editing. And through that, I've learned, and I'm still learning, how to get better at telling stories. So I wanted to share with you guys what I know so far from my journey of writing a book, from making YouTube videos, from doing this. And hopefully you can get something from these notes that I've taken from hours and hours of YouTube videos I've watched, books I've read, and strategies I've learned that I've accumulated over the years. So let's get into it. So there's three pillars really in storytelling, especially if you're making video storytelling. It's words, visuals, and sounds. So words, what you're saying. Visuals, it could be B-roll and A-roll. A-roll is what I'm doing right now. B-roll would be like if I put up a video of landscape, like mountains and stuff. And sound, your voice, voiceovers, music, sound effects, all of those create what is a good story. And so another thing that's very important in storytelling, and I would say without it, so another thing that's very important in storytelling, and without it, you don't really have a story, is conflict. And it's the battle between conflict and context. Now, what does that mean? Well, you give context, right? So let me give you an example. Context. Sorry. Example of conflict versus context. So context would be, okay, I got it. I play for Little League Baseball, right? I played for Little League Baseball for years. I would say, I don't know. I played Little League Baseball from kindergarten till 8th grade. All right, and that was Babe Ruth in 8th grade. So I think it was 6th grade. We were doing fall ball, and I was at first base. This is context. All right. First base, fall ball, played baseball for many years. First baseman, I'm a lefty. There's this new rule when you're in baseball and Babe Ruth. It's called drop third strike rule. And what it means is that when the catcher misses the third strike, like say catches it and he drops it, you as a hitter can run and go. So I was playing first base, catcher drops the ball, runner's coming at me. Catcher gets the ball, throws it, and all I have to do is tag the bag. Instead, I go, put my hand out. This guy's huge. I would say a foot taller than me. I'm not a tall guy, but a foot taller than me. Maybe 200 pounds. And this is 6th grade, so that's a big dude. And he's barreling at me full speed. And I, being an idiot, stuck my hand out. Right hand, because I'm a lefty, right hand glove. He runs into me, feel my thumb bend, still hold the ball, still get the out, end of the inning. I'm walking into the dugout, and I take off my glove. My thumb's really hurting, and it's starting to get swollen. And I'm like, Coach, I think I broke my thumb. He's like, you're fine. Just put some ice on it. There's no, you broke your thumb. Really? He was surprised. And my friend's like, oh, you didn't break your thumb. You'd be crying if you broke your thumb. And I was like, no, I think I broke my thumb. It's really starting to hurt. And so this is the conflict, right? So I gave you the context of baseball, and then you give conflict, and then you balance back and forth. Context, conflict. Conflict is coach is not believing that's broken. Friends not believing it's broken. Context is getting swollen. It's the back and forth. You meld it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's what's created a story. Then there's also the power of emotions. Emotions are what drive a story. If I said that in a monotone voice, if I was like, yeah, so I broke my, like I was playing first base and I broke my thumb and blah, 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 like it's boring. You need to have emotion in your voice. Notice how I acted out, used hand motions. I think that's what also adds to the storytelling in a sense, especially if you're doing storytelling like how it's practical for everyday use, which would be in a conversation. And I have tips for that later. So let me give you some storytelling frameworks or things that I've learned over the years that are very helpful. First framework. Sorry. It's called the Dan Harmon's Story Circle. Let me pull that up real quick. So Dan Harmon was a director, and he realized that a lot of people, especially when telling stories, they get this thing called writer's block. And so he created this structure that he found to be helpful, and I want to share with you. So step one of the structure is called You, the Protagonist. You have to establish the status quo of this world, who you are as a person, who the protagonist is as a person. So in this case, if you were telling a story to someone, it would be like, okay, like the context I gave you. It's the context. That's what it is. You, the protagonist, is the context. If you were to do a movie, you'd show the character, maybe a little backstory of who he is, maybe a little bit of a voiceover. If you were to write a book, you give the exposition, maybe some dialogue gives away who the character is. Put him in scenes where it shows who the character is. See what else. I guess a song, it'd be like you give background to that. Step two is the need. It's the conflict. This is the conflict. You got the context, now you got the conflict. Something isn't right. What does this character want? So, for example, the need was to get the out. In that example I gave you guys, was to get the out for baseball. The need in movies is whatever the protagonist is trying to do. So, like, in Whiplash, it was to perform for his band director and to get recognition to become a musician and get recognition and reach the highest level of that. So yeah, that's a need. And then step three is the go. And this is the chaos realm of the circle. The go means him actually doing it. The actions, this is the path of him doing it. So for me, the go was when he threw the ball and he's barreling at me. That's the go. In Whiplash, that's when he's, don't want to spoil it too much, but that's when he's trying to go and achieve this goal of his. That's the go. There's a lot of things that happen. Love that movie. Step four is the search. When go doesn't work, you have to keep searching. Series of roadblocks between protagonists and their needs. So for me, the roadblock was ball dropped, panic, right? Throws the ball at me. Roadblock is I break my finger. That's the roadblock. Step 5 is find. You find what you were looking for in step 2, but it doesn't go the way you expected. I got the out. But it wasn't what I expected. I broke my thumb. Step 6, take. Once you've got your hand on whatever it is that you want, you have to take it, but you have to take the price. I got the out, but I took the price, stupidly, of breaking my thumb. Step 7, return. Returning back from the start, altered by experiences, but equipped with a new need. So, I broke my thumb, go to the hospital. Yep, got hairline fracture, put in a cast for 6 weeks. off the cast, back on the team for the last couple of games, was in the outfield. I was turning back from the start with an altered experience, but equipped with a new need to protect my thumb because it was still kind of sore. Step 8, change. Change has to be made visual. The final showdown. Here is growth returning them to the start of the story. Everything looks the same, but here is different. Again, back at the baseball team, but more cautious with my thumb. I'm in the outfield instead of playing first base. So that was one, I guess, strategy that I've learned, and that's been helpful for writing / telling stories. Freytag's pyramid, or that's not what I want to talk about. Let me see. There was another thing I wanted to talk about structure-wise. It was here. This thing called a log line. And so a log line is, say you have an idea. I had this recent idea I came up with that I'm not going to share, but let me give a different idea. First, let me explain what a log line is. Sorry. It's problem, intention to overcome the problem, obstacles to overcome the problem, and solution. So let me explain. Problem. Let me give an example of a problem. Come on. Let me think of problem. Okay, problem. I gotta get a bunch of homework done, but I've only got 2 hours. Intention to overcome problem. Maybe I'll use some AI that can help me out a little bit. Like, say I got to study for a test, right? I got all these notes organized, and maybe I'll use some AI. Obstacle to overcome the problem. They might not be the best for studying because I didn't make the flashcards themselves. I don't have that much time. So studying wise, I might not be studying the best for the material. I might not get all the material. Solution to the problem. I'm going to look at the notes, look at the study guide, and also use the flashcards given by AI so I make sure I cover all bases. That's like not the best form, but that's like, you get the idea of a log line. It gives you a brief thing that you can use to reference and use to write your story. So that's what a log line structure is. Another structure that I've found useful is intro, hook, solution. Hook, intro, solution. Sorry. Hook, climax, solution. I don't know why I kept saying that. Hook, climax, solution. So hook, climax, solution is hook. Something to hook in the viewer, the reader. The thing that I said today. What makes a story unforgettable? That's the hook. Climax. The number one thing that you're going to learn from this video. The most important thing you're going to learn. Solution is now you know how to tell better stories. Or climax would be, maybe a better climax would be why I struggle with stories and why I kept struggling with stories until I found this thing, and the solution is this thing, the one thing, which is never one thing, but that's how you hook the reader in, or the viewer. And then there's this thing called writer's block, and I think having these structures really helps you get through writer's block. What I've learned also with writer's block and with storytelling in general is just write. Like today, I was thinking about ideas for the book, right? And I was struggling because I'm tired, didn't get the best sleep the night before. So I was struggling to think about ideas for the book. And so what I did was I would lay down, close my eyes, and I was thinking about the characters. And I was like, all right, what would this character do in this moment? What are we trying to do? What's his aspirations? Who is this person, this character? And I think of one thing. I would just write it down as bullet point. All right, we have that information. What's more information? I'm just trying to let it come to me. And I would just write it down once. I was like, no, that wouldn't fit with the character. Oh, this fits with the character. Boom, write it down. I kept doing that until I had a bullet pointed list of things for the story that I was trying to write. And then I just wrote it. And I don't let the judgment come on the first write. Because what I've learned is that your first write is never what it's going to be at the end. So don't even try to make it the end. Just write it. Because you need to have the first layer down. I think of stories as layers. You need to get the first layer down, right? And you're always sanding. And in order to get to that core layer, the good part, you had to sand and edit and keep editing and keep editing and keep editing until you can get there. Or else you wouldn't have found those other details. You wouldn't be able to do that. You wouldn't be able to find those, oh, what if I did this here and this here to find a good story? So you need to sand and work through the ideas to get to the best edit. And Casey Neistat says, for his quote, the key to pushing through writer's block is to look at what you do have, and out of what you do have will birth the idea that you're looking for. I think that's true. What I had was, I knew these characters. Who are these characters? How would they interact in this situation? And it took me a little bit, and that's what I had, but I figured it out. And so I think that's very good advice for writer's block. And they say it's a lot of, they talk about open and closed loops in writing and storytelling a lot. And what that means is, like, open loop is a question. Like, have you ever wondered, let me think about this. Have you ever tried to get a six-pack but found out that it was too difficult and gave up? Well, I was just like you. But then I figured out how to do this one thing, and it changed everything. That would be an open loop. What is that one thing? Closed loop is me telling you what it is, but also leading into another open loop. So it's constant chains that get hooked and opening new ones. So you're bringing them along, bringing them along, bringing them along. And what I've also learned through that is fluidity is extremely important in storytelling. If you forget to show a certain part, then people will get confused, and when they get confused, they get disinterested and they stop watching. You can keep them interested. You don't have to tell them everything, but the story needs to go in a line that's consistent, or else it gets confusing, it gets boring, it gets interrupted. It's like slamming on the brakes and taking a left turn. And so that's another important thing I've learned about storytelling. Techniques to elevate your storytelling. Zoom into the moments. Details make stories vivid. Instead of saying I was nervous, say I was pacing around the room, my palms sweating, as I rehearsed what I'd say. Details are very important. Like when I was telling that baseball story, I said he was big. I said he's probably 200 pounds. I said he's probably a foot taller than me. That gives more details than if I just said this guy was running at me. That's not enough to imagine. If you give details, important details. Don't give, like, the grass was a yellowish green. Like, who cares about that? We're not trying to paint them a whole Mona Lisa when we're telling a story, especially if you're talking in a conversation. They don't need all of the details. Maybe if you're writing, if you're making a movie, you put in more details, obviously. But if you're just telling a story, give the important details that add interest, that add to the story, that keep the story moving. And then if this is visual storytelling, discuss angles, lighting, contrasting colors, color grading, anything like that that could help visually add to the story and make you feel the emotions that you're trying to feel. And what people really like in storytelling is vulnerability. Not forced vulnerability, and this doesn't mean like you having to cry every time you see a camera. This is like just being truthful about what you feel and not putting on an act, which is hard. If you've never talked to the camera before, it can be very difficult. It takes practice. I'm still learning how to do it, how to not put on an act, and how to just be myself talking to pretty much the wall if there was no camera here. But that's another thing that makes storytelling feel real. This is why I like stories like Whiplash, why I like stories like Good Will Hunting. Another good movie that just came out, Carry On. It's because doesn't make you feel like an idiot when watching it. Carry On wasn't very obvious with the stuff that they did. You figured it out as you went along. You're like, oh my god, that's what he's doing. You're like, oh, you get the realizations. You're like, oh my, that's so cool that they didn't just tell you what it was, but he just did it. And then you figured it out as he was doing it, what he was doing. And you're like, oh, that's so smart. Same thing with Whiplash. It feels vulnerable and real because everybody's had that. At least I've had that drive and ambition like he does, but he takes it to another level of insanity, and it's just so interesting how they bring that character to that level, and then he realizes he's debating whether it's worth it or whether it's not worth it. Good Will Hunting, the feelings of insecurity, feeling like you're not enough, and people recognizing that you are, but maybe you were told a different narrative, and so you're fighting against that narrative you've been told your whole life from the new narrative that people are telling you you actually are. And it's so interesting how they balance those two. So they bring that vulnerability, those moments where he's unsure, where he's fighting it, where he's fighting the narrative because he has this old narrative that he's agreed with. And it's just so interesting how they show that resistance in the fighting. They show that with physicality, but also with the emotion, and that's what makes me love these movies so much. So applying storytelling to content creation. There's a lot of strategies, retention, all that BS, CTA, the hook, first 7 seconds, first 30 seconds, first minute, open close loops, like I've said. But I think for 2025, a good strategy would be, and what I'm trying to do, I'm still learning, is combining long form content and short form content. I think of short form content as a marketing strategy of your videos for the long form content, which is the real meat of the content. And for podcasts, I would say build episodes around a central idea, like one thing that you talk about with points, which I'm still getting better at structuring and not getting on too many tangents and talking about stuff. Especially doing a solo podcast, I don't have someone I can bounce off of and even it out so it's not as chaotic. But I'm learning. And challenge the listeners. Think about a story you've wanted to tell, how you can break it into smaller, digestible pieces for different platforms. And then just some general storytelling notes that I've collected over the years. When you're making a YouTube video, I say there's 3 primary questions you should ask before even starting to script a video and make the storytelling process. What is the idea for this video? What is the title? And what is the thumbnail? Once you have the idea, title, thumbnail, that's your packaging. And then once you can get that down and once it's good, then you can do the rest. And to really get a good story, it has to be something that I think not serves a greater purpose, but what does it teach? Why must you tell the story? Like, does it hold weight, or is it just, because you want to tell a story? It needs to have some emotion. Like, I don't know how to describe it. Just like, it just needs to have some emotion. And another thing, a ticking clock is very important too to have in a story. What does that mean? That means like a countdown, because it brings suspense and gives people a reason to stay to the end, because there's a thing at the end, which is the final day. Like, say, I'm going to run a half marathon in August. My ticking clock would be the 5 months of training I'm going to do. So it'd be the last day, which would be the half marathon. That would be the clock's up and we're running. Let's see, what else? What else do I have for my long document of storytelling notes? Oh. When someone says, tell me a story, I'm taking this from somebody else, but someone says, tell me a story, it says you panic, right? Because you don't have a story to tell on lock like that. So what I've started to do, and what I'm going to continue to do, is to create a story bank. Have a bunch of stories that I'm like, oh, that'd be a good story. Write it down, because then I can when I want to have a conversation, or say I'm like on a date, or say I'm like hanging out with some friends or someone new, and I wanted to talk to them, let them get know more about me. Conversation's kind of dying. If I have a story on lock, it can make everything more interesting. They get to know more about me. I could share an interesting story, reminisce on a good time, or maybe not so good time, but one that I've learned from, and it could be a good experience for both of us. So I'm going to keep doing the story banks. Same thing with what I've done with idea banks, which is having a bunch of ideas that I have for podcast videos, the book, and just keep creating ideas, because ideas are what fuel the storytelling. And they tell you show, don't tell. But what does that really mean? That means don't say words that describe emotions. Use the 5 senses to describe the emotion. Use dialogue to describe the emotion. Use subtext to describe the emotion. What you don't say is more important than what you do say. Am I just saying a bunch of words? Yes. But what it means is, when you have a conversation, right, people don't say all the things that are in their head. A lot of reasons for that. Maybe they're uncomfortable sharing certain parts. Maybe they don't want to tell you everything that's going on in their life. Maybe they're afraid you're going to judge them. Maybe 1,000 reasons why. So instead they might say something like, okay, I'll give you a recent example. Today, my dog needed to go outside. And my sister's been taking him out a lot, so has my dad. So my sister's like, someone needs to take Coco out. And so she didn't say, or she just said, no, she said Coco needs to go out. And it's not like she didn't say, Jason, go take Coco out. But there was the subtext where I know she's eating food. She's already taken him out a bunch. She wants me to take him out. So it's the things unsaid that show like emotion. Also, like, instead of saying, I was embarrassed, say my face flushed red. I didn't want to look at him. I was stuttering over my words. I just wanted to walk away. Like, there's so much more depth to that than just saying I was embarrassed. And another thing, practice, just record yourself. If you want to practice storytelling, especially online, practice recording yourself. Because the better you get at talking to a camera, the more natural you'll seem, and the better you'll come off as a storyteller. Let me just go through. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, there's one more structure that I want to share with you guys. And this is more of a writing structure. And it's been helping me a lot when writing the book. It's called the 4 hat structure. So you start with the artist. He's free flowing. Get all your ideas out. Don't think about the structure. Just write. Have fun. Architect. Narrow down the ideas and start to flesh out the structure that will build out towards the final structure. Writer. Start connect the dots. There needs to be some progression, regression, or changing at any point in the story. What is the goal? Entertainment, goal of the main character. What does the failure look like? What takes them away from the goal? What emotions might they feel from the successes or the failures? And then step 4 is the wizard. Start thinking about the retention. Start thinking about cutting a lot of stuff. If you can't cut 10%, you're not cutting enough, all right? Because a lot of times we talk too much, we ramble. We put too much in the exposition is what I'm finding. You put too much writing. And you're like, oh, it sounds good. But what they say is don't be afraid to kill your darlings, which means don't be afraid to get rid of things that you thought were good pieces of text. Be honest and say, does this fit in? Is this adding to the story, or is it taking away from the story? And if it's taking away, even if you thought it was a good line, you got to get rid of it. Because in the end, if you want your story to be remembered, if you want your story to be good, it's got to be good all the way through. And let me make sure. I think that's it. I think that's all the storytelling notes I have. I mean, I definitely have more. I think once I keep taking storytelling notes, I could probably give a more concise and more all-encompassing, organized storytelling video that would be much longer, and I can interview someone and have someone on the podcast. But that's I wanted to get the podcast out. I'm passionate about the storytelling stuff. I had to document a bunch of storytelling notes, so I was like, might as well make a podcast on it. As always, I will continue to get better at making these podcasts. I will continue to get better at making videos. Continue to upload once a week, every Sunday. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.